A former U.S. Marines Special Forces officer and Apache warrior by the name of William Two Feather was given the information on the child torture facilities reported on. Now we hear. These criminals were taken out by a joint forces initiative organized by tribal police and deputized village police officers in concert with local law enforcement officers, LEOs, in California. They took no prisoners. When a facility like this goes down, everyone in the facility is killed, except, of course, any children that can be saved. You could be a girlfriend of one of the men hired to do this crime, or a custodian mopping up the bathroom. It doesn't matter. You will be shot dead as a willing accomplice to a capital crime. So that's what happened in California. The native tribal police got wind of this and forced action. We are also being told the people behind these crimes are not military but rather defense contractors operating out of New York, but being administered out of Annapolis, Maryland, and using military rank designations for personnel employed. The hunt for these murderers will continue until every last one of them is removed from this earth. Death of King Charles, Biden implosion, Putin interview all point to regime change in the West. There can be no doubt now that regime change is happening in the Western world. The signs of this include the death of King Charles, the implosion of Joe Biden, the removal, again, of the U.S. Defense Secretary, and the big Putin interview. The peasant revolt by farmers all across Europe and now spreading to places like Canada and India are other signs of this. We are also getting preliminary reports from Polish intelligence that many Khazarian mafia leaders, including ACH Satanist Victoria Nuland, were killed in a missile attack after they fled to Ukraine last week. Let us start with the announcement that King Charles has cancer. Royal family sources tell us he was already dead at the time of his inauguration. This was staged a satanic 6 months, 6 weeks and 6 days after the murder of Queen Elizabeth to help turn British public opinion against him. A formal announcement of his death is expected soon. The sources say Princess Anne will become the de facto British monarch afterwards by acting as regent for Prince William's 10-year-old son George. And is a good person who has been working with the White Hats for quite some time now. Now let us look at the controlled demolition of the fake Biden presidency. Special counsel Robert Hur has declined to prosecute President Joe Biden in part because he was an elderly man with a poor memory. In other words, Hur said Biden was mentally unfit to face trial. That puts the so-called leader of the Western world below the dumbest and most mentally defective person in the entire U.S. prison system. This actually might be true if you look at all of his gaffes. Just last week he said he talked to the dead French President François Mitterrand and the dead German Chancellor Helmut Kohl. He also called Egyptian President Sisi the President of Mexico. Stephen Miller, former White House senior advisor, says, "It is a very low bar to be ruled mentally fit for trial. That very low bar, the President of the United States does not meet." He went on TV Live tonight and talked about opening up humanitarian gateways from Mexico to the Gaza Strip. Actually, since the real Biden was executed in 2021, it shows the decay of the actors hired to act his role. Either that or the actors are being told to act senile to deliberately undermine the credibility of the entire Biden presidential farce. Either way, it is clearly the end game for the Biden show. Now let us look at the Tucker Carlson interview of Russian President Vladimir Putin. The interview was watched over 150 million times on X, formerly known as Twitter. X is owned by Elon Musk, who, according to the Russian FSB, works for the U.S. military's National Reconnaissance Office. Our senior CIA sources also tell us U.S. Commander-in-Chief Donald Trump was in Russia at the time of the interview. There can be no doubt the Putin interview was meant to undermine years of intense anti-Russian propaganda in the West. This means the U.S. military and Russia have agreed to form an alliance. Now Russia's TASS news agency reports several dozen news agencies around the world want to interview Putin, making it clear the campaign to demonize Russia is ending. However, the story of the elephant in the room nobody is allowed to talk about definitely applied to this interview. Putin and Tucker avoided talking about Khazaria and the Khazarian mafia, who they are now in fact allied against. There were many hints though. Putin said the Khazarian Bolsheviks established the Soviet Ukraine, which had never existed before, and for some inexplicable reason, Lenin, the founder of the Soviet state, insisted that they be entitled to withdraw from the USSR. He also mentioned, for unknown reasons again, the Bolsheviks were engaged in Ukrainianization. Since Putin started his interview with a mention of the kings who destroyed the Khazarian Empire and turned Russia into a Christian state, it is clear he was deliberately dancing around the KM elephant. However, he did say the current rulers of Ukraine idolized people who exterminated Poles, Jews, and Russians. If we are generous, we can assume he didn't want to give the KM any excuse to accuse him of anti-Semitism. There can be no doubt though Putin's people left enough hints for people to figure out Russia has been fighting a centuries-old plot to recreate a greater Khazaria. The other big point is Putin confirms he reached a deal with George Bush Sr. to jointly develop missile technology whose only possible target would be China. Putin says this plan was sabotaged by KM power brokers in the US who wanted to turn the USSR into several quasi-state entities and to subdue them in a divided form, to use their combined potential for the future struggle with China. Our own FSB sources confirm the real aim of the Russian war in Ukraine is to defeat the Federal Reserve Board and their KM owners like the Rockefellers and Rothschilds. Also, as mentioned at the top, Polish intelligence says a missile strike last week killed high-ranking German military generals and other officials. Since Victoria Nuland, the real president of Ukraine, was there at the time, we can speculate that she was taken out in a joint U.S. White Hat and Russian military operation. Time will tell. To understand what the U.S. military really thinks about the Ukrainian government, listen to what five-star general, as far as this newsletter is concerned anyway, Douglas Macgregor says. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky is a former actor that played transvestites, was picked up by an oligarch named Kolomoisky, which funds the neo-Nazi Azov battalion, and was blessed by Victoria Nuland. One of the first things U.S. President Donald Trump did when he took office was fire Nuland. Hopefully, now this mass murderer has gone to hell where she belongs. Trump also has come out publicly against the mass-murdering Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu is a dead man walking. Leaders from around the world, including the president of Turkey and the head of the UN, are accusing him of Nazi-style war crimes. Saudi Arabia, Egypt and all the countries of the Middle East are taking action against Netanyahu's satanic actions. The world is finally waking up to the fact Israel was created by the Nazis. Speaking about Nazis, Argentine President Javier Milei showed up in Israel to show the world who his real masters are, the Khazarian mafia. He may well have fled to Israel to seek protection now that the Argentine Christians have figured out he is a satanic murderer. In any case, Trump is leading the charge. Take a look at the massive crowds chanting USA awaiting the arrival of President Trump at a rally in Conway, South Carolina. Trump has made it very clear he thinks Barack Hussein Obama is the real power behind the Biden fakery and promises to end it. To confirm this, in the videos below you can see Nancy Pelosi and Biden admitting Obama runs the show. So Obama, the guy behind the big transgender push and the border chaos, is being taken down by Trump. This will almost certainly happen before November. The U.S. government-run Epoch Times put out the following headline: Mail-in ballot fraud study finds Trump almost certainly won in 2020, showing there is going to be a change in power soon. However, we need to see Hillary Clinton Rockefeller, Barack Hussein Obama, etc. paraded before the cameras in handcuffs to confirm this. Dominoes are definitely falling though. Senator Mitch McConnell has announced his resignation. Now Congressman Mike Gallagher, who was one of the Republicans that voted against the impeachment of DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, has been ordered to resign. As mentioned at the top, the already deceased Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is back in the hospital. He will not be seen again other than CGI or a double, CIA sources say. This time it may be officially released by the KMMSM that sadly he passed away due to complications, the sources say. In Hungary meanwhile, President Katalin Novak resigned amid public outcry over a pardon she granted to a man convicted as an accomplice in a child sexual abuse case. We are also hearing from British intelligence that they are on the warpath against high-level satanic agent Simon Case, who runs the British Civil Service. They confirm Case was involved in a 2012 plot to blow up the Olympics and kill the entire royal family. Case also negotiated a €10 million bribe for Prime Minister Boris Johnson to sell out in a trade and cooperation agreement with the EU. This money is in his offshore account in Henry Ansbacher & Co., Road Town Tortola, British Virgin Islands branch. Even worse, BJ's boss Case was aware of Queen Elizabeth's induced bone cancer and was therefore party to a second attempt at regicide, sadly this time successful. He knew the Queen was dying but kept the fact from senior members of the royal family, including Princes Andrew and William, preventing them from reaching Balmoral in time. He orchestrated the false time of the Queen's death and kept the then Prime Minister, Liz Truss, in the dark. Once Case is removed, and he will be removed, then the entire Rishi Sunak regime will collapse as well. By the way, in a sign of how evil these people are, they are trying to add fluoride to all of Britain's drinking water. In the US, illegal immigrants get more money for food stamps than struggling Americans and are about to get paid more than veterans. In Europe, they get air travel, quality hotels, delicious restaurant lunches, new smartphones, pocket money, free medical care and many other subsidies. When representatives of the sheriffs and police chiefs of the United States went to Washington to confront President Biden about this, he refused to meet them to talk about border issues or talk about crime that's going on because of the border issue. The KM leaders of the West are also afraid to meet angry farmers. Here you can watch French farmers coat the Ukraine embassy with manure. As the West and EU continues to champion war, a single crap is not given about the CO2 footprint of tanks and bombs, yet they are attacking the farmers for their cows farting, a Polish intelligence source comments. Throughout Poland, farmers in 260 cities are protesting in front of city halls because they have nowhere to sell the food they produce. Warehouses are full of Ukrainian grain and more is coming. They are against the Green Deal and limiting CO2 emissions in agricultural production. Russia's Putin, by contrast, showed what real leaders should be thinking about when he told Carson that mankind is currently facing many threats. Due to genetic research, it is now possible to create a superhuman, a specialized human being, a genetically engineered athlete, scientist, or military man. AI, genetics, or any other fields, the time will come to reach an international agreement on how to regulate these things. This sort of thing will become possible as soon as the KM is removed from power. Getting back to the KM, we noticed the big US Super Bowl money harvest show just ended. People need to wake up and understand the NFL is registered as a show business and not a sport. If you want to know who will win or lose, all you need to look at how the betting is going. Whoever the most people bet for will lose. That is what happens when games are rigged.